Welcome to WOA Harvesting. Veteran returns. I have finally come home from military service. I once believed leaving the military would mean a new beginning, but when I returned, no one and nowhere was waiting for me. With only my old backpack, I walked into the forest, not knowing where the road ahead would lead me. The storm arrived faster than I expected. I found a narrow rock shelter that could block the wind and rain. Rain poured down violently, carrying soil from the hillside. My military training told me to watch every movement around me. Through the rain and falling stones, I heard a faint cry. It was not the sound of the wind. I ran out of the cave and found a goat hog buried beneath the fresh landslide. The slope could collapse again at any moment, but I could not stand by and watch a life disappear. I pulled the folding shovel from my backpack and began digging from the outside to avoid hurting it. Waterlogged soil was far heavier than it looked. Every shovel stroke had to be fast, yet carefully controlled. When its front legs were freed, the goat struggled as if it knew rescue was close. I pulled it free and checked each leg carefully. Fortunately, it was exhausted but only lightly injured. It trembled from cold and fear. I held it close until its breathing slowly settled. The rain had not stopped, so we returned to the rocks. From that moment, my journey was no longer completely lonely. Before darkness fell, I searched for dry branches near the rocks. A small fire could decide whether we survived the night. I chose wood buried beneath the fallen leaves, where it was still dry enough to burn. Dry bark was shredded into tinder. It was a simple skill I had relied on during difficult days. After shielding it from the wind, a flame finally appeared. I fed it small twigs instead of rushing to add heavy wood. The fire slowly stabilized and warmed the cold rocks. The goat began moving closer to it. The smoke kept insects away and dried my wet clothes, but I still needed to keep the shelter properly ventilated. I did not have much food, but at least we had warmth for our first night. I checked the scratches on the goat once more. It was standing stronger and beginning to trust me. I gathered soft branches and leaves for bedding, keeping it from lying directly on the cold stone. After the storm, the forest became strangely quiet. Only the fire and the small footsteps beside me remained. I began making a temporary wooden bed. A raised platform would keep me above moisture and runoff. Straight poles were cut to matching lengths, so the surface would carry weight evenly without tilting. I joined the poles with cord and wooden pegs. It did not need to look perfect, only strong enough for the night. While I worked, the goat searched for fresh leaves nearby. That was a good sign that its strength was returning. I reinforced the bed with short support logs. Its weight had to transfer safely onto solid ground. A layer of dry leaves softened the hard surface. It was temporary, but it was the only home I had that night. I sharpened my knife before continuing. A sharp tool is safer than a dull blade that demands too much force. Small stakes were driven beside the bed, preventing the crosspieces from shifting under my weight. I trimmed every sharp wooden edge. In darkness, even a small splinter could cause an injury. Once the bed was finished, I watched a goat for a while. It stayed close instead of wandering back into the forest. Perhaps both of us had lost the place where we belonged. Inside that rocky shelter, two strangers had found each other. The rain had eased, but I was still covered in mud. I decided to find running water before complete darkness. The stream was running fast after the storm. I entered only the shallow section, using large stones for support. The cold water brought my senses back. I washed off the mud while keeping my backpack safely dry. I returned to the rocks before the light disappeared. The goat was still waiting exactly where I had left it. A bamboo tube was used to heat water beside the fire. Clean water was essential after such an exhausting day. I checked the remaining food in my backpack. Every small portion had to be saved for tomorrow's journey. I spread my mat over the bed and placed supplies by the wall. Everything needed to stay within reach if the storm returned. Dinner was made from a few simple supplies. In the forest, warm food matters far more than luxury. I warmed bread and food over the glowing coals, keeping the fire small to save wood and reduce smoke. The goat stood calmly beside the fire. I gave it the fresh leaves I had gathered earlier. Night arrived quickly in the forest. I checked the rock wall and escape route before lying down. My return had once felt completely empty, but tonight, at least I had a small companion beside me. I slept on the bed I had built, while the goat rested nearby and the fire slowly faded. I woke several times to feed the fire and listen around me. The habit of keeping watch had never left me. The next morning, I packed everything and left the rocks. They had saved us, but they were not suitable for a permanent home. The goat followed me and found food along the way. I did not tie it down. The choice to stay was its own. We stopped beside a clear stream to drink and rest. I always look for water before choosing a place to settle. After hours deeper in the forest, I found a raised hillside. It was near water but safely outside the flood path. I set down my backpack and studied the slope, wind, and sunlight. A good shelter must begin with the right location. I cleared the brush from the outside inward, keeping the ground visible in case snakes were hidden below. Thick vines were cut at the base and pulled away. Straight pieces were saved for the structure later. As the undergrowth disappeared, the side became visible. I needed space for the shelter and a small working area. Branches and fallen leaves were gathered separately. Some could later become fuel or ground covering. After several hours, the site was clear enough to dig. I marked the foundation according to the natural slope. I removed the remaining small roots. Left in place, they could lift the floor or trap moisture. The soft topsoil was moved aside for later use. The firmer layer beneath would become the main floor. I cut into the slope to create a partially sunken floor. This design would keep the shelter cooler and better protected. The rear earth wall was kept nearly vertical, with a slight angle to reduce the risk of collapse. The excavated soil was piled in front of the site. Later, it would become the shelter's protective outer layer. I stopped to drink water and check my hands. During long work, resting at the right time is also survival. I stretched a tarp to create temporary shade. It allowed me to keep working without wasting too much energy. The floor was raked and leveled into one plane. Any error here would affect the entire frame. I checked the level with a long straight pole. High spots were removed instead of adding too much loose soil. The ground was beginning to resemble a room. For the first time, I could imagine a place to live. I selected medium-sized trees that were straight and healthy. No large tree was cut for only a small part of the build. The poles were carried back one load at a time. I avoided excessive weight that could cause an injury far from help. I sorted the wood by length and diameter. Thicker poles would become posts, while smaller ones formed the roof. Leaves and broadplant strips were collected for covering. Natural material is light, replaceable, and suited to the humid climate. I carried each bundle back to the site. The goat stayed nearby as if guarding our new home. The four corners were measured and marked first. An accurate base makes the posts much easier to raise. Foundation poles were laid along the marked lines. They established the exact boundary of the shelter. I cut the crossbeams to their individual lengths. Every joint had to sit at the correct load-bearing point. The first posts were raised and set deep into the ground. I compacted soil around them to reduce movement. Crossbeams connected the posts into one stable frame. From this point, the shelter began standing on its own. I added central supports for the curved roof. Even spacing would distribute the weight more effectively. Each pole was tied and locked with wooden pegs. I tested every joint before moving to the next one. The main frame slowly enclosed the sunken floor. The earth behind it also formed a natural protective wall. I carved small sockets for stronger connections. This kept the rope from carrying the entire load. I checked the base of every post one final time. Once the roof went up, correcting mistakes would be much harder. I chose flexible poles that could bend without breaking. They would create the shelter's distinctive curved roof. Each roof pole was bent gradually across several supports. Forcing it too quickly could split the wood at the center. Both ends of each arch were secured to the lower frame. The shelter's shape began to emerge from the curved ribs. I climbed onto the frame to align the roof ridge. Every arch had to follow one continuous line. Long braces were added between the curved ribs. They would keep the roof from twisting in strong wind. Every lashing was tightened in the same direction. One loose joint could allow the entire roof skin to shift. I brought in thin bamboo poles for the outer lattice. They were light and flexible enough to follow the curved roof. The bamboo was laid in evenly spaced rows. It would support the leaves and earthen layer above. I cut the bamboo to match the roof length. Sharp ends were removed so they would not pierce the covering. Leaf panels were woven from the bottom upward. Overlapping them this way allows rain to run off instead of entering. Each panel was tied tightly to the bamboo frame. I left no large gaps where two layers met. The covering began to close one full side of the roof. The first real shade appeared inside the shelter. I continued covering the opposite side, keeping each row straight so the weight remained even. The lower edges received extra fastening against wind and rain. There are also the areas most likely to peel away. I checked from inside for any remaining shafts of light. Every visible gap received another layer of leaves. The leaf roof was nearly complete. Its curved form allows water to run off without collecting above. The final locking strips were added from inside. They held the woven layer firmly against the frame. I mixed the excavated soil with water for the outer coating. It had to be sticky enough to hold, but not overly wet. The mud was shaped into small clumps before going onto the roof. Smaller pieces compact better and are less likely to slide. I placed each clump over the leaves and pressed them together. The woven layer supported the mud and kept it from falling inside. The surface was smoothed along the curve of the roof. A continuous earth layer blocks wind, holds warmth, and softens rain. I extended the mud coating over the edges and side walls. Every transition had to be sealed against water. I compacted the lower corners by hand. These areas would face water splashing up from the ground. After many hours, earth covered almost the entire shelter. Its natural color allowed it to blend into the surrounding forest. I stepped back to inspect the curve and any thin areas. The small shelter could finally protect us from rain and wind. I hung my backpack from the frame and arranged my supplies. For the first time since returning, I had somewhere to set everything down. The goat rested beside the home we had found together. It once needed me to save it, but perhaps it also saved me from loneliness. This is not the end, but the first day of a new life. Thank you for joining me on Woa Harvesting.